Hi everyone, this is a video on the content from chapter 7, 8, and 9 of our readings in commercial society. So to begin our conversation about these chapters, we need to talk about cost. So we've talked about scarcity before. Scarcity means that our resources, our time, our space, our capacity to do things is limited. We have to make choices based on that scarcity. So resulting from this is cost. Things are costly in this way. So when we say something is costly as economists, we think of cost in terms of the foregone alternative. So this means what would have otherwise been my number one alternative for purchasing this good or service, for using this good or service, using my time in this way. What was the best foregone alternative in that choice I had to make? All right, so talking a little bit about scarcity, we know that scarcity exists, and so economic wants and needs exceed our available productive resources. Cost then becomes that consequence of scarcity, and true cost is always going to be greater than a monetary cost. We know this because when we see a price tag, that is going to be the market value of a good. To purchase that good, to use that good, takes time, other resources, takes mental capacity. So our true cost of a trade and exchange is always going to be greater than that monetary price tag, okay? When we think cost, we are not just thinking that price tag unless we want to look at market price, okay? All right, so let's go to our first example of opportunity cost. If I decide to go to a certain movie, what is my opportunity cost? So first off, say I have a choice between two movies. I could go see a scary movie or I could go see a funny movie. In this case, whichever movie I choose, I might choose the scary movie. What is my best foregone alternative in that case? It would have been a funny movie. So in that case, I'm giving up certain entertainment maybe for the movie. Also, when I think about going to a movie, I think about the time spent going to the movie theaters. So between driving to the movie theater, purchasing my ticket, sitting in my seat, watching the advertisements, it's about a 3-hour process, I would say. So what would I have been doing otherwise in that 3 hours if I decided not to go to the movie that day? What was my best foregone alternative? That is my opportunity cost. So when I think of going to the movies in general, first I think of the ticket, the popcorn, the pop, whatever. I spend $20 at the movies going to the movies. But once again, I spent about 3 hours at the movie theater going and seeing this movie. I spent my time doing that. I could have been studying, I could have been working, I could have been walking my dog. There are many other things I could have been doing in that time, but I made the choice to go see this movie. What was my best foregone alternative? What was I giving up that was also, once again, the best alternative? Let's think of a time where you might have done something, purchased a good or service, and your price of that good or service or that exchange might have been more than just that monetary price you paid. The cost might have been higher. So if you decide to go skiing for a day, you're giving up that entire day of time to go skiing rather than do something else. So how valuable is your time? That is going to determine our opportunity cost. If it's a high opportunity cost, my time is valuable. I could have been doing something much more. When my opportunity cost is high, that foregone alternative is valued at a high rate. Like that foregone alternative could have been time spent elsewhere, and that time was valuable. Okay. So the higher my opportunity cost, the more valuable these resources, this time, this space, this capacity is to me. So the idea of high versus low opportunity cost tells us that when I have a high opportunity cost, my foregone alternative to whatever choice I'm making, it was also valued at a very high rate, okay? So when I have a low opportunity cost, that means what I'm giving up for this good or service, it's not as meaningful to me. It's not as costly. So high opportunity cost is a good thing. All right. One last thing to mention, if I want to think about transaction costs, if I have a high opportunity cost, meaning my time is very valuable to me, I want to minimize my transaction costs by any means, right? So if I don't want to spend my hour going grocery shopping, that's where I'm going to pay someone else. I can put a monetary price on how valuable my time is, because now there are services available that I can pay people in order to do my grocery shopping for me. And I can use that time I would have used grocery shopping doing whatever else it would have been, okay? So in the case of a high opportunity cost, in order to lower my transaction costs, I might spend more to lower those transaction costs than if I were to have a low opportunity cost, a low valued foregone alternative, okay? Moving on to chapter 8, institutions. So when we think about institutions, I don't want you thinking of physical buildings. I don't want you thinking of places. I want you thinking about more so this connection that keeps this connection of mutual values and beliefs within a certain society, within a certain population of people. What these institutions are frameworks for which people interact. So institutions can help trade. They can facilitate trade by bringing people together, by holding together these frameworks. So a bank, once again, I don't want you thinking of the bank as a physical location. Rather, think of the bank as this institution, this framework, this web for how people go about the transaction of storing their money. In this case, people know what to expect from banks. You walk into a bank and you know you will give them your money to hold, they're able to loan that money out, and in return, you'll receive whatever savings. If we're opening this savings account, you'll have some savings yield where they give you interest in return for being able to hold your money and loan that money out. Within this institution, we have expectations we set out of the bank has expectations they set out of us as customers, and we know what to expect from each other. Therefore, my transaction costs are lowered in this case. When people know what to expect from one another, when we have common values, mutual beliefs, when we all share a common goal or interest, our transactions costs can be lowered by having these institutions. So within institutions, trust obviously must play a large role in it. In order to bring people together from all over, to bring practically strangers together, you have to trust one another. You have to have trust in the institution. Once you trust an institution, you're able to trust its members. You become a trusted member of the institution. And this is where your trust is increased, knowing that you can trust other members with the same common interest as you. Trusting people means cooperating with others as well. When we have trust, we can have cooperation between individuals, strangers, for trade and exchanging goods and services, and coming to the marketplace with different things that will help in exchange, will help each party within the trade, okay? Values, we know values are a large part of institutions, meaning that when you decide to be a part of an institution to use goods or services within an institution, you must uphold certain values that institution believes in. An institution's core values, when you go to this place expecting a certain outcome, these core values are upheld, okay? So we know that in a commercial society, institutions play a huge role. Other institutions could, an example of another institution is marriage. Marriage is an institution in which two people come together, sharing the same common values, sharing the same expectations from one another. And they must trust one another in order to enter this institution of marriage. So when we think of marriage, we're not thinking of a physical location. We're thinking more of this framework for how we're going to interact with one another for the rest of our lives. So marriage is an easy way. We say two parties come together and make these agreements with one another in some kind of trade. So moving on, let's think about other examples of institutions. As I said, marriage is one example where this is what we know and we expect from people entering a marriage. Language is an institution. Language can bring many, many people together in an effective way in order to necessitate and facilitate trade, to facilitate cooperation. And then a more unfortunate example is slavery, meaning that even though slavery was a horrible thing, it was an institution. It did bring people together that they were able to come to a common trade, and you knew what to expect from that. So how do these institutions in themselves lower transaction costs? Once again, we're taking the guesswork out of what comes out of this facilitation of trade. We know what our outcome should be. When we have a fully established institution, that will uphold my belief that this outcome will become possible. All right. So trust in institutions, as I said, when you become part of an institution, you need to trust the institution itself, the members within it. You need to trust that everybody else upholds the same values that you do within that institution. Trust can be considered both a resource and an institution in itself. So the reason is because, as we said, an institution facilitates cooperation. In the same way, trust coordinates what individuals can expect from one another. In this sense, trust in itself is an institution. Trust is also a resource because it adds value. It has value to individuals. People value their trust in one another, in their relationships, in making trades. You read a little bit about the development of a reputation. You can develop reputations from it. So people really value how much trust others have in them. So trust, all in all, facilitates interaction, makes trade possible. Trust is a great thing. Chapter 9, value. There are many different types of value. When we use the word value, it's very ambiguous. We need to be very specific when we talk about value because there are so many different types. As economists, we're worried about subjective value and market value and marginal value, okay? So let's go through and do the definitions of each of these different types of values. Starting with objective value is an intrinsic value that is independent of anything else, independent of preferences, of time, place. We can have someone come in and assess the objective value over and over consistently. An objective value is, like I said, it is the value in which it intrinsically holds, absolutely independent of any other types of relationships that may affect value of a good or service. So the opposite of objective value is subjective value. Subjective value changes dependent on the circumstances, dependent on the situation, the environment, the circumstance. We may be talking about a good or a service or whatever we are talking about that holds value. Subjective value is important to the individual. Individuals have different preferences. We know that that's true because we can say, if I go to a famous art museum and I think a painting is hideous, but somebody else thinks this painting is beautiful, come to find out this is a multi-million-dollar painting. I can say that subjectively, I would not value that painting high. I would not highly value that painting. Whereas if someone were to say, wow, that's a beautiful painting, their subjective value is a lot higher of that painting. And then we can talk about market value from that. Our market value can be assessed over and over, and we know that's the selling price at which, when we take it to the market, consumers, it is going to be the price at which equilibrium exists in our market. So monetary value, when we talk monetary value, we talk about the value or the cost in terms of dollars, in terms of any kind of money or currency. So a monetary value is the closest thing we have to being able to put some kind of consistent price on a good. Monetary value tries to capture all of these other different types of values of a good in one consistent measurement. So in our economy, that's US dollars. And then the marginal value is going to be the value of one additional unit consumed. Okay. So when I talk marginal value, I'm saying I've had 6 slices of pizza. How much do I value the 7th slice of pizza? That's the simplest example that I could give a marginal value. But then marginal value is further considered when we're looking for economic value of a good. We always want to know that market price, that market value is going to be the subjective marginal value of a good. All right. So we can compare objective, subjective, and market value. Once again, I use the example of a painting. In this case, I'm using a $3,000 block of cheese. So objectively, this block of cheese is $3,000. Market value, $3,000. Subjectively, if I am allergic to cheese, I can actually say this is something I negatively value. This is something I do not prefer. If I do not like cheese, if my preferences, if I do not like Parmesan cheese, I'm not going to value this subjectively at $3,000. I might value this at $10, if that. So value and money, as I said before, money is able to facilitate trades with a lower transaction cost because we're trading in a basic standardized form, a standardized currency. So how does money now play a role in determining value, in creating value, in trade? So money has 3 different functions. Those functions are medium of exchange, store value, and unit of account. These play a role in value because when money is exchanged for a certain good or service, we are putting a monetary value on this good or service. We are trying to capture in terms of money in this standardized currency, US dollars. What is this worth to me? What would I accept in exchange for this good or service? How much am I willing to accept? So 2, our second function of money is store value. We know that money in the US is backed by the US government. In storing value, we're able to say, I have this amount in my savings account. So when I say I can store my value, if I have this standardized currency and I have so much standardized currency, I don't think that day to day I'm worried about that losing its value. Okay. I'm not going to be worried that if I have $10 one day to go to the store and buy cereal and milk for breakfast, that the next day they won't accept that $10 in exchange for cereal and milk. It's going to hold its value. Okay. And 3, unit of account. Money makes measuring unit of account a lot easier in a society and an economy. Once again, I am able to give you an exact amount of value. So $20 US is a meaningful unit of account All right. So in talking institutions and trust and value in cost, all of these terms are extremely intertwined. In order to have an institution, we must have trust. In order to have trade, we must have cooperation. In order to have cooperation, we must have that trust. So a lot of these terms are super intertwined. If you're having any confusion about any of these, please go ahead and throw that into the Discord, into our content questions channel, and I'd be more than happy to keep discussing any of these concepts talked about in this video. All right, so that wraps up chapter 7. Thank you for watching, and have a great weekend.